So Gilgamesh is on rate up over on the NA version of the game, and some of you may be wondering, is he worth rolling for? And as an avid Gil enjoyer myself, he is my favorite character throughout all the different Fate works. I think I can confidently say he is definitely worth rolling for, whether you need yourself a good DPS or a decent farmer, although you will need to invest in that append skill. He can be everything you're looking for and more. After all, the title of the video, or at least on the thumbnail, should say he will always be good, and that is something that I thoroughly believe. But before we get into that, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and maybe leave your thoughts in the comments down below, but only after you've heard what I have to say. So what do I mean by the fact that Gilgamesh will be one of those servants that is always good? Or you could also read this as he's a very, very good investment. Well, every single time the meta seems to shift, Gilgamesh always gets a buff to make sure that he's always decent. When he first launched in the game, even though he had a very strong power mod, his NP kinda hit like a wet paper towel until they gave him an NP upgrade, which not only scaled up his NP damage, but also gave him a very much needed NP damage buff on his NP to make sure that he was always going to be doing some pretty decent damage. There was even the statement of he's an AoE that does single target damage on servants that was kind of floating around. But then we started entering this age where, well, every single servant kind of needs to have a battery to be relevant. If you don't launch with a battery, or at least some way to accrue NP over time, you're probably not a very good servant, because sure, maybe you have 5 hits on all of your cards, which is something that is going to be insane for Gilgamesh moving forward for any type of card buff that they throw out there, whether it's buffing quick cards again or buffing the buster card. Whatever they do, this guy's rocking 5 hits on everything and a ridiculous extra attack, which you know I love to see. But regardless of that, he didn't have a battery, so what did they do? They threw him a 30% battery, which isn't the crazy coveted 50% battery or even the rare 70, 80, or 100% battery that some random servants have. But it was still good enough, because with Merlin, who was kind of cycling around in the meta at the time, his charisma plus Gil's 30% battery gave him 50% NP, and he's starting 50% starting charge CE, would let him be a crazy farmer in the Merlin era, because for someone like me, I would use a Rosh for wave 1. I was fortunate enough to have a kaleidoscope. I would slap that on Lancelot. A Rosh would bring in Merlin. That 20% would get Lancelot to his NP, drop a bunch of stars, and then Gilgamesh, with his newly acquired battery and pretty much every single final free quest having a servant, would pretty much smack them into oblivion. And even if they were a Lancer, well, Hero Creation would say that any crits that he would do with his succulent buster cards would just erase even the toughest of Lancers that would dare to cross my king's path. But then things go a little bit silent for the boy Gilgamesh. He's not a quick servant, so during years 3 and 4, he's not really seeing much use unless you're using him in weird team comps like myself, because you didn't have Scotty. And then Castoria rolls around for year 5, and well, he's not an art servant, so you really can't use him for any of those setups, although the 50% battery that he could effectively get from Castoria could be nice in some scenarios. Especially, again, he does have the double arts card, so he plays very nicely with a Merlin and Castoria type team comp, so that was at least kind of a positive thing for him. But then Buster Farming comes out, and it seems like Gilgamesh is not going to get to take part in it, because Koyenskaya really wants to be paired with 50% battery big boys. But then over the horizon, literally about not even a month later, Oberon comes out and allows Gilgamesh to partake in the meta. He's got the NP buff on his own NP, meaning he plays super nice with Oberon, because Oberon loves to give people that supercharged NP damage buff, and he gave the convenient 70% battery, meaning that Gilgamesh, even with his small 30% battery, was able to get the job done with any 50% starting charge CE, just like the good old days. But alas, things were not going to look good for our boy Gilgamesh. It looked like there were just stronger and stronger Buster Servants coming out. I mean, Morgan could dominate with the man attribute. Arjuna Alter could pretty much decimate everything with him being a berserker with essentially free power mod on anything. And then Kukulkan came out, who just kind of drop kicks everything into oblivion. Or you have Koyen Dark, who's out there dropping meteors on people, and God forbid they're an Earth attribute person, because they're going to get eviscerated. But then they decide to chuck Gilgamesh another buff. Last New Year's, they gave him pretty much a buff for only himself. It gives Sky attribute people even more NP damage, which again plays super nice with Oberon for one, because he's getting even more NP damage on top of Oberon's own skill and his NP, so now he just absolutely nukes people whenever Oberon uses his third skill on him. But it also said that even if he's not fighting servants on, say, waves 1 and 2, he is still doing very satisfactory damage, starting to hit that 30k mark, which is where you actually start to leave the AoE levels of damage and start to get to weaker single target level of damage, which was really good for Gilgamesh. And here's all I can say. It doesn't matter what servants are going to be released throughout the remainder of this year. They could be Proto-Gil with his insanely new revamped kit or whatever have you. It could be Olga Marie, who could be like the best Buster servant we've ever seen by far, because she could be a beast, and Lord knows that is pretty much hard carrying Draco. That classing just makes her way better than she has any business being. But they will never forget the OG Gil, and something people gotta understand is that you look at Artoria and you look at Gilgamesh. They are always just gonna be good servants. Why? Because they are the face of the Fate franchise. As much as Ritsuka and Mash would love to say, yeah, we're the flagship guys, you know, we're the dudes. When people think of Fate, they think of us. That's just never gonna be true. You're gonna think of Artoria, and I'm never gonna call her Altria, or you think of Gilgamesh. It's one of those two. They are the main poster child for the game. So if you ever pick up a Artoria, which I have thankfully picked up 2 of and have never regretted it, or you pick up a Gilgamesh, who I am trying to pick up an NP2 copy of as we speak, you can rest assured that they will always be good. And if you ever feel like they're slightly falling out of the meta, they probably have a buff somewhere in the vicinity. It was not just a few months before Gilgamesh got his buff that I was complaining on stream, being like, well, yeah, it feels like Gilgamesh is slowly kind of starting to fall out of favor. Maybe we should just stick to using our Kukulkans, our Morgans, or Arjuna altars, and even Koyan Dark, she can come to the table as well. But then lo and behold, they chuck Gilgamesh a buff, and now he's also just still one of the better Buster guys you can use. The only thing really holding him back is his 30% battery, but would I doubt the fact that they would just upgrade his second skill to give him a 20% battery and Lord knows maybe a Buster buff or something, 20-30% for 3 turns? It seems feasible, because they're never going to let Gilgamesh be bad, in the same way that they're not going to let Artoria be bad. So this is more or less of a video talking about whether or not you should or should not summon for Gilgamesh. He's a very strong servant. You can bring him to CQs. I have a couple of footages of him just 3-turning things in the background. Brought him to some Lancers. He still got rid of them. We did get a little bit lucky. That was first try. It was a little bit lucky, because if they attacked Gil twice, he would have gotten eviscerated, because he doesn't have any protective abilities, despite having really strong armor. And if you've read the VNs, you know he should be really thick and tanky. But for some reason doesn't have that yet. I'm sure he'll get that in the future. For the same reason, you know, that Artoria doesn't have an Avalon skill. We'll just wait for her to get something along those lines as well. But you can bring him to anything and he'll perform rather well, but he's also just a good investment. You know, there are some servants that kind of fall out of the meta. You know, you got guys like, say, Lancelot and Atalanta. I just talked about Scotty earlier today. That sure, they're pretty solid options, but then you start getting people like Parvati or Edmond Dante's getting a buff, Voyager gets a buff, and then they kind of get pushed out and bullied out of the meta, and you really only use them unless you're exactly me, and you're like, hey, I think Lancelot is super cool, and I think Atalanta super cute, and that's the only reason I'll still keep using them. But you just have to have no fear. Gilgamesh and Artoria, they'll always be good. And I guarantee you, sometime within the next at least 2 years, we're going to see another buff come to probably Gilgamesh's second skill to bring that up to par a little bit. God forbid they give him like a Masashi style buff, because of Gate of Babylon, he gets double hits. His hits are already insane as is. Who knows what the next thing they're going to chuck over his way, because I would have never thought they would have just given him even more damage on his first skill, because I thought that's kind of how they were balancing him, that he had not the craziest, you know, neutral damage, but when he fought a servant, he was A1, the best guy to be bringing. But then we got all these Buster AoE servants, and really the only one that can kind of hang with him, I would say, is going to be Tesla moving forward, because he's got really good power mods, got the 50% battery, and can guarantee his second skill now. But let's be honest, that boy Tesla is not going to be reigning supreme for that much longer. They are not going to let this goofy guy Tesla be the best Buster AoE archer for that much longer. They're either going to drop another really crazy guy, or Gilgamesh is getting another buff. And I will now feel very, very goofy if in like the next couple of weeks they drop a buff over Tesla's way. But hey, if they want to do that, I'll eat my words, because Gilgamesh will still be good. That doesn't mean that Gil got worse, it just means that Tesla got better. So Should you summon for Gilgamesh? I don't know. Do you want a unit who's already really good, is going to get better whenever he gets his buff on New Year's, and then is probably going to get even better the next year or two after that? I don't know. You tell me. A very good, solid investment servant. Only real downside is that the boy has no real defense, but I mean, you can either just 3-turn things with Koyanskaya or bring a Merlin for illusion, or like I mentioned earlier, he's got double arts cards. He plays really nicely with Castoria, which is ironic given the events of Fate Zero and Fate Stay Night, but I digress. You can just bring him with like decent sustain servants and he'll be absolutely fine, and just keep blasting people with basically a power mod that hits every single servant in the game and a bunch of random enemies as well for some reason. And he'll be absolutely fine. He'll definitely cook for you. But that's just my 2 cents. I think he's worth pulling for if you want to save for Castoria, or for the summer units, or for Arcoid. By all means, it's perfectly worth it to do that. It's just Gilgamesh is always going to be a very solid investment. And this has been your Gilgamesh propaganda for the day. Look, if there's one thing everybody in my audience will understand, is that there are 3 servants that I will always simp for. Gilgamesh, Morgan, and Jalter, and maybe Marie Alter. I gotta finish reading Ordeal Call too, but we'll see about that one. With that being said, if you summon for Gilgamesh, let me know in the comments down below if this video just served as a good blessing for you. And also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below in general, because I think I'm kind of right on this one, that Gilgamesh will just never really age as one of the main poster children of the Fate franchise. But you can let me know if you think I'm a big dumb dingus in the comments down below, and well, I'll probably respond. I'm baited quite easily. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys, have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.